feature presentation.
Welcome back to another Untitled Movie Review. I am one of your hosts, Matt Rohrbeck. Alongside, he's allergic to tomatoes, but he is Tomato Meter approved, Eric Marchin.
Matt, do you know what time it is?
It's Armageddon time, baby.
Woo! Yeah.
Today we are talking, and this movie not maybe that kind of energy, but hey, well, I'll buy into it. Today we are reviewing James Gray's Armageddon Time, starring Anne Hathaway, Jeremy Strong, Banks Repeta, Jaylin Webb, and Anthony Hopkins, and more. Eric, how are you?
I'm good, Matt. I'm good. You know, we're on our third review of the day. Obviously, you know,
How
this is
dare
more
you show the inside
baseball kind of thing. You know, we've been dealing with some snafus in terms of behind the scenes stuff, but I think
trying
overall,
out new tech, guys. I'm trying out. Apple released their new update, Ventura, not based on Ace Ventura.
Ventura.
Their new Mac OS, where you can use. I mean, hot tip for any people who make podcasts or videos and stuff.
You said
like
hot
that too.
tip, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
not a. Okay, and then you can use your iPhone now. It's called continuity camera, and your computer will automatically detect your iPhone and use it as your webcam or your camera. It's awesome, but we're working out some kinks, so bear with us. If I freeze at any moment, blame it on Apple.
That's fair.
Armageddon time.
Yes.
Eric, we've talked a lot, even as recently as the other review we did today,
Which is
about
After
this,
Sun.
which is After Sun, which you guys can you guys can check out now, by the time this releases. This kind of trend or this theme we're seeing a lot in directors lately over the last, maybe 5 or so years. You have a pillow right behind you, which is maybe not the thing that kicked off this trend, but could have been, of directors looking back on their childhood or a moment in their life and doing kind of an autobiographical sort of, or inspired by their childhood type movies. So we saw that with Roma. We've seen it as recently as The Fabelmans, which isn't out yet, but we do have a review for it from TIFF. After Sun has elements of that. God, we can list off more. What else lately has done? Kenneth Branagh did it with Belfast, Minari. There's
Lady Bird.
Yeah, so it is definitely something which I totally understand of writing what having it be personal, but this might have been the thing that broke me a bit on this trend, where it's not a bad movie at all. I like James Gray. I think the movie's fine, but I'm starting to get fatigued a little bit with this kind of like, not self-serious, but like self-important kind of, I need to tell you why my upbringing and my family deserves
It's
to
so
be turned in.
cinematic and deserves a feature-length
yeah,
film.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you. I mean, like it, and I think it's not necessarily, again, the film's fault. I just think it's with the trend, and not to say that like every filmmaker is like, oh well, because Alfonso Cuarón directed this amazing movie, I've got to now tell my story. Like the autobiography,
superhero fatigue's real too.
The autobiography, the autofiction, semi-autobiographical movie is nothing new. It's been something that has been done, time and time again. But it's just more recently, it's been more concentrated, and it's like, okay, well, you're taking this from a point in your life where you felt this was, pivotal to you growing up, or a moment that defined you as a person and would change you kind of your trajectory and where you were going and who you became. And that can be cinematic, and that can be, very didactic in telling you who the filmmaker is, or
we literally just covered this in After Sun. Yeah.
And I mean, even with the Fabelmans review, that's a thing where, you look at it, you can look at it in two ways. You can look at it as something being very earnest and personal, and conveying that and connecting with the audience in a universal way. And then you can also look at it as a vanity project, or something that's very egotistical and narcissistic and self-indulgent.
Yeah.
And like, again, there are great autobiographies that are out there, and features, like he James Gray is not the only one to do this. It's just he's coming at a point where we've gotten a lot of them, so I can understand why some people will probably maybe feel a little bit kind of
Burnt out,
cold,
or
or
yeah,
yeah,
cold.
kind of
Yeah.
just kind of feeling like you're at your end a little bit with that. But I will say I quite like the movie, and I think on an emotional level, it hit me, and we'll get into why,
Yeah.
to the point where I literally was in tears during the screening.
Which you don't see very often from Eric Marchin. I say this, I don't know how much I've talked about it on these shows, but I see a lot of movies with you. We basically see every movie together, other than if we need to play catch up in our respective cities. Um, you never. I don't want to say you're like robotic when you watch a movie, but
No,
like
you
you're
said stoic before, where like
stoic, where you're
I have
like
a good poker face.
you do. You just, I never know basically how you feel about a movie until I talk to you after. Where I'm a little bit more animated when I watch a movie.
Yeah.
I'm not one of those person that like will make it about me where I'm like the loudest laugh in the room, or like or something like that. But if you're sitting right beside me, you can kind of feel how I feel about a
Oh
movie.
yeah.
Where Eric just, I'll hear you laugh if I know a movie really gets you if I hear an audible Eric laugh, because most of the time you have this like internal laughter where you like know something's funny and you're probably like laughing to yourself, but it's not like this hearty kind of laugh. And that goes for many emotions in a movie. And I mean, I've
Yes.
cried in movies where you don't know that I teared up and things like that too, where that's a little easier to hide. This one for you, not as easy to hide, but like I
No.
know a movie's hitting you when I audibly can tell how you feel about it, because it's just you're very professional and very, and when I say stoic, I mean it more in a professional sense of like you were there to watch the movie and put your thoughts into words, whether it's your review for Rogers, or your review for here, or how you speak about it to other people, where I'm very much in the moment of like how I feel about the movie is how I feel about the movie in that moment. And you can either tell that I fucking hate it, or that I'm enjoying it, or that I'm just bored, or anything like that. And in this movie, I was somewhere in the middle, and we'll get into the the nitty gritty of why it hit you so hard, and maybe why I was kind of mixed on it. But I'm mixed positive, don't get me wrong. Like
Yeah.
I still enjoyed the movie a fair amount. I didn't dislike my time with it. I just think, yeah, it's maybe not the movie's fault, although like partly if the movie was great, I would think the movie was great, but like because I think it was just okay to me, that other stuff crept in a little bit more, where I'm like, all right, did this need to be like, I get the stuff with his grandfather, which you'll get into. Like, I get that it's very personal, but like, I did let that creep in a little bit afterwards, where I'm like, I like the movie, but I'm starting to go, okay, guys, like, is this something that really need to be told on film, or is this something that you could have, and James Gray has put into his other films, right? Like I've gotten some of that in Ad Astra. I've gotten a lot of it in The Immigrant and like things like that, where I feel like, yeah, we'll get into it, but anyways, well, where do you
Yeah,
want to start?
and just quickly going back to like us knowing each other so well, like I
Yeah.
still always use the reference point of when we were watching Edward Norton's Motherless Brooklyn, and you
Oh
were,
fuck.
I think, like 5 rows down away from
At
me.
wit's end.
And I literally looked at you at one point because you were in my eye line, and I saw you kind of hunched over like that. If
This
you're
is
watching
like,
this on YouTube,
if
and
you're
I
on
knew,
YouTube,
I knew, I was like, Matt hates this.
if I'm sitting like this, you probably can't hear me. But if I'm sitting like this in a movie, and sometimes I'm enjoying it if I'm lying like that or like sitting like that. But most of the time, I'm like, fuck, I need to leave. And in that movie during TIFF, especially because this movie we didn't see, we saw it after it didn't play TIFF.
No,
But
it played the New York Film Festival, and it also played Cannes before that.
something like Motherless Brooklyn is like we saw it like 3/4 of the way through the festival, and I'm at movie 22 at that point, and I'm like, I can't do it anymore. Where like
Sorry, Ed.
but yeah, you can definitely tell this is just if you want a little bit more about Eric or I. But in this movie, I could audibly hear Eric reacting to the movie, so we'll get to why. But Eric, where do you want to kick it off?
Yeah, I think just kind of the general
We're 10
plot.
minutes in, and we're like, where do you want to kick it off?
The general plot of this movie is it's from the point of view of Paul Graff, who is the James Gray surrogate, a sixth grader growing up in Queens, New York in 1980, and sort of dealing with not only coming of age, but figuring out what he wants to do in life and where he's going, and kind of feeling a little bit directionless and unmotivated, and he finds a new friendship with Johnny, who has been held back a year. Paul is played by Banks Repeta, and Johnny is played by Jaylin Webb. And whether or not you're into the performances by the child actors, I think that will be a make or break, especially with Banks Repeta. Um, but what I loved about the film, and I think what works, is the era in which it's set feels so sincere to what James Gray grew up in, and also looking at the idea of capitalism and white privilege, and also reflecting on the sense of where do you fall into that. And this at times does feel almost like James Gray's admission of guilt, and being able to capitalize on his place of privilege, but it's also looking at the identity of the Jewish American family at this moment, and sort of blue collar working class family, trying to do the best they can. They have one son who is in private school, while Paul is in public school, and trying to, again, he's a bit of a Joker class clown type. The biggest, kind of most emotional arc of the film, and the thing that got me, is Paul's relationship to his grandfather, played by Anthony Hopkins, who is a European Jewish man who tells his story of how his mother came from the Ukraine to America, or Europe and then to America. And I think that's why I'm ultimately going to give this movie a really strong review, or a positive review, because I felt that relationship was so genuine and authentic, in how you have a family dynamic that is kind of not dysfunctional, but there are moments where you see the parents, played by Anne Hathaway and Jeremy Strong, not being able to kind of really get through to Paul, and the one person that does, and the person that's kind of intermediate in this situation, is the grandfather. And the grandfather's the one that is kind of like your best friend also, and your advisor, and the person you look up to, and also spoils you. And watching that, and because Anthony Hopkins in real life is also Welsh, my own grandfather, who right now was diagnosed with bone cancer, is British. And there's just moments that felt so close to what I'm
Yeah.
going through right now, in terms of what the family goes through in that storyline, that while watching it, and just the way, I mean, Anthony Hopkins is a great actor, but the
And he's great in
way,
the movie.
yes, but the way that you know he is with Paul, with Banks Repeta, it just hit me. And there's one
Hmm.
moment in particular that comes later, and I don't want to spoil anything, because I don't know what is spoiler for something like this, or
Yeah.
what is or isn't. But there's just one moment that kind of felt almost too close to home and too personal, and it just it my 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 defenses were down, and like James
Dude,
Gray got me.
and that's great, dude. Like that's really like, and we talk about, this is a separate conversation, but film criticism. I mean, there's been conversations and just criticism in general where, you know, how can you objectively approach a movie. But like, to me, I throw that out the window and call bullshit, and I say that it's all subjective. And like, if a personal experience you bring into how it affected you in the film, and I'm like, that's personal to you, and that's going to be personal to many other people who watch this movie that will connect with that same element you connect with. So I'm like, and just because if your defenses were down, or you saw it at the right time, like, you bring something personal in every movie you watch. I think, like, sometimes you see movies at the right place or the right time, and it affects kind of how you feel about a movie. And I feel like that's totally valid, especially even in as film critics. And I think because that's how audiences experience movies, right? Like, if something happened to you and you happen to see a movie at the exact right time, but you would have maybe felt different about it if you saw it months ago or years ago. And it's even something we talked about in our After Sun review too, of like looking back at things. And there are movies I've watched that, as I got older, I view them completely different than when I saw them when I was younger, or maybe vice versa. And like, I feel like that is part of the movie going experience. And I feel like that is okay to bring into a review, right? Like, if you see the movie at the right place, the right time, and it affected you personally like that, like, I think that is to the movie's credit. And it's not just, well, I'm bringing myself into that, so I'm giving it a little bit of, leeway, or rating it on a curve because of that kind of stuff, where I call bullshit on all of that. And I just feel like that is, part of it. And then that is part of being, a film critic and talking about movies for a living. Like, you do bring yourself into it. Like, I know there are some people who review movies from a, you know, what's on screen, what I learned in film school, what a textbook tells me about like how a good movie is made, and things like that. And I'm just like, I don't know. It's, to me, it's all subjective, and a lot of that you can bring into this movie. So however you felt because of you connected with the relationship between the kid and the grandfather in that movie, I'm like, that means the movie fucking was good for you. And I think that's great, man. And like, I I'm with you with a lot. I think the best stuff in the movie, and sorry because we had to cut and stuff. I don't know what we've already kind of covered already. I'm already losing it. But like, the relationship between, Paul and his grandfather, Anthony Hopkins, Aaron, is the best stuff in the movie, and the stuff I connected with the most as well. Maybe not on, because it, my grandparents, um have already passed, and I'm 4 years removed, 3 4 years removed from some of it. Even, I mean, both my grandparents on my dad's side passed during the pandemic, so I'm only a couple years removed from that. But I also didn't have the same relationship with my grandparents as you did, Eric. Like, I was a little bit more removed. I've talked about this on other shows. Like, my dad has 7 brothers and sisters, so like, I'm not like had that one-on-one relationship with my grandparents on my dad's side. And then on my mom's side, I was very close with my Oppo when he had a shoe store, and it reminded me of Paul's grandfather here, of like when I used to go to my Opa's shoe store and hang out with him and stuff too. And that stuff is really, really great in the movie. I think
Mhm.
the best stuff. Where it lost me, you already kind of brought up, like, Banks Repeta's performance was grating for me. And I think that is going to be that thing that is, whether you're in on this movie or not. I found him kind of, and child actors, like, I'm not trying to, obviously, shit on him or anything, but like, it just really didn't work for me. Like, his performance just felt like a kid reading lines more so than a genuine, authentic, lived in, believable performance. Again, I keep bringing up After Sun. I think it's because we just talked about it, but the naturalistic dialogue and performances in that movie just work so much better for me and feel so much more believable. Where, seeing Jeremy Strong with his, wig and his accent and his Ray Romano diet Ray Romano kind of performance kind of thing is just like, or that's how he looks. He's not necessarily acting like that, but like, and it was a lot. I think Anne Hathaway was actually more restrained than we thought she was going to be in this, but
I think Anne Hathaway's great in this.
yeah.
Like, the more I think about her performance, and like, I think she gets unfairly picked on
Mhm.
by people on the internet, by press, public, whatever you want to say. But there's something very sincere and honest and earnest about her as an actor, And I feel like this is a role, like, I mean, she's been great in like, obviously, like Jonathan Demme's Rachel getting married, she's incredible in that. Here it just feels like it's a role that she's never had the chance to play in a way that's not just simply, the concerned mom. Like, there's more to that role than, I think, if it was written by somebody else, or it was more of a kind of adaptation of a book or something like that, that it wouldn't have the same depth. And I feel part of that comes from, again, being part of Gray's perspective and coming from his own childhood, but also the way in which Hathaway kind of has to be the one to be the referee between um Repeta and Strong in certain scenes. And again, that age group, or that generation that kind of grew up where parents were tougher on their kids, and sort of that kind of having a bit of a cyclical repeating a cycle to that. And then on top of all that, like, the stuff in the background, like, it again is telling you that, in the last decade or so, with the Trump administration, and sort of what's being discovered under the rocks, and people coming out of the woodwork that are you know neo-Nazis
Racists
and
and
yeah, and all that stuff. Maybe that wasn't just recently. And like, the framing of Ronald Reagan running for president, and Reaganomics, and that era kind of just beginning. And if you're caught with weed, you could go to jail for years. And the war on drugs, and again, the Nancy Reagan stuff that kind of came in the late 80s, where like it all feels like it is foreshadowing what is to come, but also saying like, okay, well, this was always a part of the fabric of America, and
yeah,
especially a place like New York that is considered so liberal
yeah,
compared to most other cosmopolitans or cities, in the US. And thinking about also, again, the Trumps and how they kind of factor into this movie, especially in a private school scenario, and how opportunity is given to those that are from a certain class, and a certain ethnicity, and how certain people will have a leg up in life, and how it's unfair, but people will still take advantage of that. And it does feel like Gray is feeling guilt for his part in his opportunities that were given to him that might not have been given to other people. And we see that in the relationship between Johnny and Paul. And I think that stuff also is really strong. And
yeah.
I think Jaylin Webb is quite good
I agree.
as Johnny. And they're both kind of like the class clown types, and what have you. But there is this almost like Jonathan Lethem, talking about Motherless Brooklyn, Jonathan Lethem Fortress of Solitude style arc with those characters. And again, Paul wanting to be an artist but not really sure what avenue to explore there, and figuring that out. I think there's a lot worth recommending in all of that. I don't know if it comes together as well as something like Ad Astra, which also had a really captivating and poignant perspective on the father-son relationship, and the distance between a father and a son,
Yeah,
especially one that's trying to emulate the father to some degree as well, but the reputation kind of haunts the son. um James Gray is one of those guys who I think is a very good filmmaker, and an even better um public speaker. And he's one of those people that you could listen to have a conversation on the state of media, on the state of film, on movies in general, and you can become so engaged with what he's saying. And a lot of what he's saying makes perfect sense, and he has a really level kind of perspective. I think sometimes his movies, my two favorite films of his are Ad Astra and Two Lovers, the Joaquin Phoenix Gwyneth Paltrow movie. Um, but a lot of his other movies, there are moments within those films. Like, I think the look of The Lost City of Z, and some of the storytelling about whether or not anthropology, you should kind of intervene and try to, bring a world that doesn't want to be a part of modern society into the light, or something as kind of more commercial as We Own the Night, which kind of was coming off the heels of the success of something like The Departed, which also, both movies had Mark Wahlberg in it, and Wahlberg's an actor that's been in several of James Gray's movies, with The Yards as well. Um, but there's just something about his films that don't always resonate
Yeah, I
in that way,
agree.
even though I think he is a really good filmmaker. Armageddon Time is one of those movies where it's like, I think it works on an emotional level. I think it works partly on a didactic level, talking about sort of that social commentary, or the reflection of how, things weren't great back then, even though, like, it's not sentimental. Like, this is the one
No.
thing that I do really like about this movie, is that it is not sort of looking back and saying like, oh, that was when it was good to
Yeah.
grow up.
New York was great back then.
Yeah. No, it
um
still had Trumps in it in
Yeah, it
1980.
sure
So
did. I like the look of New York in the movie. It's something we always talk about when I see New York depicted in this time period, or even up into the early '90s of like
well, shot by
the
Darius
yeah,
Kanji, who shot David Fincher's Seven, Michael Haneke's Amore,
yeah.
Uncut Gems.
Oh right.
He's such he's one of those cinematographers that, I mean, he started in commercials, but um, one of the most underrated guys working
It looks
today.
great.
So.
I mean, again, I love the look of New York. I love the look of the movie. I don't like the title treatment, but I get it. That's just
Oh
such a
yeah, yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah.
just a small kind of thing.
But the
Um,
dirtiness, and
yeah,
like the period in which this takes place, like, that's something as well that's not nostalgic, where it's like it's showing you like New York was a shithole. It was
in
ugly and
places, yeah,
gross. Yeah, but it also had character,
yeah,
and it still does. We've talked about this when we were in New York for the White Noise press junket, where, like, you walk down the street in New York, there are areas that are beautiful, but then there is a lot of areas that are kind of like this, the streets are filled with garbage and things
yeah.
like that, and it's much better than it was in 1980, or in the late 70s. But
There's a
there's
charm
something
to it,
weird.
like a weird charm to it. Yeah, I know. I
Yeah, and it's
agree.
a time capsule too of that period in the 70s and 80s, where now people do kind of look fondly back at, like, oh, Times Square was once a place where you could get killed,
Yeah,
and now it's like
a
one of the
tourist
most
central.
iconic
Yeah,
tourist attractions, or
traps.
locations
Yeah,
ever.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, other than that, like I agree with you with Anne Hathaway. Like I do feel like she's actually, it could have gone that other way. That is like something we talked about. I know we keep bringing up other movies that are similar, but in Fablemans with Michelle Williams being like a little overacting, where I
Well,
feel
it's
like it
stylized,
is,
right? Like,
yeah,
the performance is very stylized for the time period, but also in which that character's generation grew
totally.
up in, right?
And Hathaway, I doesn't fall into that trap here, and obviously trying to do very different things, right? Two very different mothers. Um,
Both Brokeback Mountain
yeah,
alumni as
there you
well.
go. Jeremy Strong, a guy that I love in Succession. And I think we're kind of on the same page. Where I think you liked him a little bit more in this than I did, but
He's
hasn't.
got some good moments, again, with the grandfather stuff that
Yeah,
I think really works, but I understand where you're coming from, where it is a caricature to a
he's
certain
the one
degree.
playing dress up or like a
Yeah.
costume like play or something. Where I'm like, all right, maybe Jeremy Strong a little too much in this, but and again with Banks Repeta's performance, it was just like I couldn't buy into it. It was just grating, and I know the character is supposed to be a little annoying, and he's a kid, right? Like he's just,
Yeah.
but I just
But the fear of his father, I think, does work.
I
Like, the
agree.
idea of Jeremy Strong's character being volatile and, borderline abusive,
Mhm.
in the way that, you know, parenting was at that point. Because, again, it's hard to completely judge, the way that someone was brought up, because it was a
Of the
different time.
time,
But
yeah.
when you watch it, it's like, okay, yeah, this truly
Oh,
was
when you're
child
watching
abuse.
it in 2022 for sure. But then we talked about how, nuns used to treat kids at Catholic schools and
Well,
stuff
even
like that. Yeah,
teachers, right?
teachers and stuff. Even in this, right? Of I'm not sure how kids are treated in school nowadays, but like, and some of that stuff what you said about how Johnny's treated in his class compared to Paul, even though they're doing similar things and stuff like that, and the racism that Johnny sees and the anti-Semitism that Paul sees in his school too, where he's not like just because
Well, in the
he's
private school as
yeah.
well, right?
Right. And then the stuff with the Trumps and what you're saying about, how it's reflecting, present day, both political and just from a cultural standpoint, like I think is a bit like, I don't know, obvious or on the nose, which is just like, yeah, a
Heavy-handed.
little heavy handed, but like, it's fine. Again, I watched the movie and I didn't, uh, again, it's another one of those movies that I think like, it's fine. I'll never really think of it again. And I know I give that criticism probably too often, but middle of the road stuff for me um is just, it's hard to talk about, one, and two, I'm just like, I don't know, maybe I'm just so over these kinds of movies, so it just didn't resonate with me as much as I maybe wanted it to. But there is some good stuff in there. I really do think Anthony Hopkins is great, and that grandfather grandson relationship is great, and it's worth seeing even just for that.
Yeah.
For sure. And then you get the other stuff, and again, the social commentary, all that stuff is fine. I just um I think it's just kind of very surface level. So
Yeah, I understand where you're coming from with that, and there is that, like, where you're seeing the template now a little bit more, where the coming of age movie, even like before Roma with Boyhood, like the idea of like establishing kind of the family dynamic, but then also kind of looking at how someone moves from that and takes the lessons that they learned, or the morals and ethics of growing up, in a household, and applying that to the real world, and taking the advice that, for example, the grandfather gives in one really beautiful moment, where you have to be an ally and stick up for those in need, um and especially how upfront and blatant the racism and homophobia and anti-Semitism is in a private school of all places.
yeah.
Like the idea that these are going to be, the future leaders in industry and politics,
And a
and
Trump tells you that in the movie.
yeah, and it's like, okay, well, again, maybe 1980 wasn't as great as you think about, as even though you're a child, you think about then, and like what you, especially if you're a white kid, were able to get away with at that point, and situations that you're able to get out of, and feel as though, like you had some sort of complicity with, the idea of the system working for you, and letting the system work for you, where others it traps and incarcerates.
Yeah.
And so, like, that, I think, again, it feels like Ray is trying to work something out in his own way, therapeutically, even, where it's like, what was my role as a sixth grader in all of this, and trying to figure out who I wanted to be, moving forward, and the type of person I wanted to be moving forward. And I think it leaves you in an interesting place, where it doesn't feel like the character, has evolved in a way that I think some other movies, some more Hollywood films might do it, where it's like, oh, they really have become someone else. I
Right. They
think
learned from
it's
this and yeah.
it's more gradual, right? Like, I think you start to learn over time how to behave, or what's fair or what's unfair, and after a while you start to realize, okay, maybe I want to distance myself from, this type of sort of way, or behavior, and I'm starting to see it for what it really is. And again, like, I like that as well, because I feel like that's where the nuance does come into play, where it's not like, the end of the movie's like, I learned something today. It's like, no, it's like, it's something I'm going to have to keep working on.
That's fair.
And I'm sure Gray's still working
Oh,
on
I'm
it,
sure. Yeah.
like, in,
Working through it in
where
this.
where
Yeah.
he is. Yeah.
Anything else you want to touch on? You didn't go really in depth with the how the Anthony Hopkins, but I guess that gets into kind of spoilery
It's
territory.
spoiler territory, but I will say this, like, there, like, again, there's even just like a line where Hopkins says, or calls, Paul Jellybean, and
Hmm.
my grandfather and my mom
Call you that.
always
Yeah.
called me
Yeah.
Jellybean, or you know what I mean, Jellybean.
Yeah.
And it's like that stuff, like, again, really connected in a way
Yeah.
that I felt like, oh, I see that
Yeah.
in my own grandfather, in my own life, and like
Yeah.
that's the thing where I can truly
Totally, man.
empathize with James Gray as a filmmaker and as a person. And like again, like I think if you have somebody that is like that in your life, especially when it is a grandfather, you can always confide in that person. There's always something where when you're talking to a parent that it's not as easy to. I think there's something
There's
about
like
being
one
kind of
step removed kind of thing. Yeah.
yeah, because the grandparent less uh, is less of the one that's going to tell you right or wrong. They're going to listen to you and you're going to listen to them. And I think there's even some moments that are really haunting where, you know, Hopkins's character tells Repeta about, his grandmother fleeing the Ukraine and heading over to
Ellis
England
Island and
and then yeah, and then coming over to America and like how that haunts Paul and like he's having trouble sleeping in one moment and um yeah, it's also its pacing and its structure I think is also kind of interesting because the private school stuff doesn't come in until like halfway through the movie, like in terms of him making that jump into or being integrated into that society or that type. So half of the movie is spent like with the public school system and looking at like the problems that public schools have where it's like too many kids, not enough teachers, not enough time to really educate somebody. And like that's also I think being very critical of institutions that are letting kids down or slip through the cracks
yeah,
as well a little bit. And again, it comes to down to privilege and who and the contacts you have in life to kind of get you ahead and who benefits from that and who doesn't and who is going to get a leg up in life and all these things are being contemplated and discussed in a way that feels like it's both I feel bad for benefiting from it but also we need to look at this and see like okay, we let down generations even before we got to Trump being elected president,
totally, man.
because it was always there.
Yeah. I'm gonna give the movie a 3 out of 5. Mixed positive, I would say on my end. I still think it's worth seeing, but maybe spread it out from seeing some of these other autobiographical kind of directors' childhood movies. Don't see them compiled into like we just came off TIFF, seeing After Sun and the Fablemans and stuff like that, and all these other movies that I referenced. But it's definitely still worth seeing. So 3 out of 5 for me.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it a 4 out of 5 because again, I think the story of the grandfather grandson hit me on an emotional level. I like the stuff that it's echoing with the social
Yeah,
commentary of the time, but also how it's not so different from what we're living in the present. It's just different people replacing the role of figureheads and how you know uh, white privilege and guilt and these things kind of all come into play. So I think it does have a lot to say. I don't know if it completely lands the mark, but I think it does so in a way that is worth watching.
totally. You guys can check out our other reviews that we have up right now. You guys can check out our reviews for
After
yeah,
Sun, which we
which we
just
just
mentioned,
mentioned.
The Fablemans, which is another autobiography as well. Glass Onion. We have plenty of TIFF reviews still in the works. I mean, we just recorded another one with The Good Nurse, so
Yeah,
it's still coming fast and furious with those TIFF reviews. But we also have stuff for movies that are now playing in wide
like
release, like Black Adam.
Black Adam, Halloween Ends, Amsterdam, Tar, Rosalind, Werewolf by Night, Don't Worry, Darling. So we've covered all the kind of big films from the last month or so. So go check those out over on the reviews channel. All those TIFF reviews that Eric mentioned are still up on the channel. The most recent episodes of the Untitled Movie Podcast, we have a Black Adam spoiler cast you guys should be able to check out. Eric and I saw The Rock in person at a Black Adam event here in Toronto. So that was a fun story about that screening. Not a fun story, a miserable experience that we had at that screening. So a
Yeah.
fun story, I guess. Go check that out.
Will that be in our own adaptation of an
Of art, yeah,
autobiography?
probably. Mine's just gonna be bad cinematic experiences as I've had. Just completely depressing and cynical. And we also talked about the Super Mario Brothers movie in episode 134, Last of Us in 133. There's a TIFF wrap up in 132. So go check out all of the episodes of the Untitled Movie Podcast. One-stop shop for everything. Head over to Letterboxd at untitled_movies. You can find the rest on YouTube and podcast services everywhere. And follow me on all those social medias at Matt Rohrbeck.
And I'm Eric Martin. You can find more of my video reviews on rogerstv.com/cinemascene and on the social medias at EM6211.
Until next time.
And I don't want to miss a thing, even when I close my eyes. You gonna cut me off or what?